At the beginning of the story, we see an airport where we find a pilot named Brad. He is rushing toward the plane while talking to his daughter on a video call. His daughter says, "I saw on the news this morning that the weather is very bad in the area you're going to. Many flights have been canceled because of it, so you should cancel your flight too and come back home." But Brad laughs and replies, "I've flown safely in bad weather like this before. Don't worry, I'll be home very soon." Hearing this, his daughter happily ends the call. Brad then goes to the cockpit and meets the co-pilot. The co-pilot was a little nervous because today would be his first flight experience. Just then, a flight attendant comes in and calls Brad outside. Outside, a police officer was waiting. He informs Brad that, due to an urgent situation, he must escort a dangerous criminal. Her name is Tony Hatton, a strong and extremely dangerous person facing murder charges. She is to be taken to another country by plane to serve a life sentence. The police officer tells Brad, "We are entrusting you with this responsibility because you are a skilled and discerning pilot." Brad agrees and seats Tony at the very back of the plane so that other passengers are not inconvenienced. Everyone else takes their seats, and Brad confirms with his staff that all passengers are on board. Then the plane takes off. Once at cruising altitude, Brad sets the plane on autopilot and talks to his family with the co-pilot. Showing a photo of his daughter on his phone, he says, "I love my daughter very much. In this world, it's just the two of us." Meanwhile, the passengers on the plane were enjoying their journey, unaware that a terrifying event was about to unfold. The two pilots in the cabin were happy, and the plane was flying smoothly. But suddenly, the weather deteriorates, and the plane begins to shake slightly. Brad becomes concerned, sensing that something is wrong. He immediately announces to everyone to fasten their seatbelts and tries to communicate with the control tower via radio. However, due to the bad weather, the radio stops working. Just then, a violent lightning strike hits the plane, causing it to shake violently. Brad comes out of the cockpit to check on the passengers. Seeing that everyone is okay, he feels a bit relieved, but gradually, the plane's lights begin to go out. Just then, the plane jolts violently multiple times, and Brad hits his head on the ceiling, falling to the floor. He suffers a deep injury on his forehead. The passengers panic at the sight. Brad quickly returns and, along with the co-pilot, tries to regain control of the plane. But this was the most difficult moment of their lives, because in the midst of the fierce storm, they could see nothing ahead. Brad says, "We need to bring this plane down, or one more jolt, and it will break apart." They immediately begin to descend, and the plane rapidly moves downward. The passengers scream in terror. During this chaos, the mobile phone of the police officer guarding the criminal, Tony, falls. He unbuckles his seatbelt to pick it up, and a flight attendant also unbuckles her seatbelt to come forward and help. But the plane is descending at a very high speed. As soon as they release their seatbelts, they are slammed into the ceiling. The impact is so severe that both of them die instantly. The plane descends to a very low altitude, but Brad and the co-pilot somehow manage to stabilize it. However, the plane is nearly out of power, and Brad knows he cannot make it to the airport. He decides to attempt a crash landing in the sea, but then they spot an island not far away. Brad quickly changes the plane's direction toward the island and decides to make an emergency landing there. After a tense struggle, Brad successfully lands the plane on a road on the island. Fortunately, all passengers are completely safe, with no injuries. At that moment, a short circuit occurs at the rear of the plane. Brad feels a little relieved because it shows that some electricity is still functioning. After all the passengers disembark, a flight attendant informs Brad that the police officer guarding the criminal, Tony, has died, and one flight attendant also lost her life in the accident. Brad feels deeply saddened upon hearing this. Meanwhile, the owner of the airline notices that one of his planes has suddenly gone missing. He had not seen it land, and because of the bad weather, the radio had been out for a long time. So, communication with the pilot had been impossible. He calls in a rescue specialist named Scars Dell, a person skilled in locating and saving people trapped in dangerous situations. The airline owner tells him, "I want all the information about my plane, where it went, and where its crew and passengers are." Scars Dell then begins his search. Meanwhile, after landing on the island, the passengers are worried and ask, "Why did we land here?" Brad gathers everyone and explains, "We had to land here because of an emergency. There's still a little power on the plane. We're trying to fix the remaining systems. Until then, please stay calm. We will get out of here very soon." Brad goes back to the plane to try to repair it, but realizes the aircraft's power is nearly gone. There is no choice but to wait for help. They take out a map to determine their position. The co-pilot studies it and says, "We're stuck on a private island. This place is dangerous. There are people here who don't listen to any government or authority. If they capture us, our lives will be at risk, and our government won't be able to do anything." Hearing this, Brad says, "Then we must get a rescue team here by any means. They're the only way out for us." They both begin repairing the radio, but it was completely destroyed by the earlier lightning strike. Brad returns to the passengers and says, "The radio isn't working, but don't worry. We'll go to the other side of the island, and from there, we'll try to contact the control tower somehow and alert a rescue team to come." With that, Brad takes a very bold and brave step to save himself and the passengers. He says, "You'll come with me, Tony." Then he removes Tony's handcuffs. Speaking to the co-pilot in the cockpit, he says, "You stay and work on repairing the plane's power. I'll do whatever it takes to get a rescue team here." Tony and Brad run into the jungle to look for a radio. Along the way, Tony thanks Brad, saying, "You trusted me." Back on the island, a militant gang is seen. Someone runs up to the gang's leader and reports that a plane has made an emergency landing, and there are people from several countries on board. The leader gives that messenger some money and tells his men to prepare. Inside the jungle, Brad and Tony move forward. Tony asks Brad, "Why did you free me? And where are you taking me now?" Brad replies, "I can't risk everyone for you. There's a dangerous militant group here, and you'll have to work with me to deal with them." Tony says he has a military background and served many years in the U.S. military. A moment later, Tony's voice stops echoing from behind. When Brad turns around, Tony is gone. He has run off to save his own life. Brad is left alone and pushes deeper into the jungle. While moving through the jungle, Brad reaches an abandoned factory where he finds a telephone. It's an old, worn post office-style phone in bad condition. Brad rigs together the telephone wires attached to the wall and, after some effort, gets the phone working. Brad quickly calls the company helpline. He explains his location and the whole situation. But because the line is bad, his voice doesn't come through clearly. The helpline drops the call. Then Brad has an idea. He calls his daughter and tells her he will write down his location and all other information on paper and get it to her office. At that moment, someone attacks Brad from behind, but Brad manages to grab and knock the attacker unconscious. Right then, Brad senses another person entering the room, so he hides. The newcomer is none other than Tony. Tony has subdued several thugs, taken their weapons, and calls to Brad, "Don't be afraid, come out." When Brad comes forward, Tony hands him a gun and says, "Protect yourself." Together, they go down to the factory's lower level and find a camera. From the camera recordings and the passports strewn nearby, they realize the island gang's scheme. They kidnap people, extort large ransoms from their families, and even after getting the money, they often kill the victims instead of releasing them. Seeing this, Brad realizes the passengers are in grave danger. They come outside and spot a vehicle, the same car belonging to the gang member Brad had earlier knocked down. They jump into the car and speed back toward the plane. Meanwhile, the passengers are waiting, hoping rescue has come. Suddenly, the sound of a car approaches. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief, assuming Brad sent a rescue team. But it isn't a rescue team, it's the island militants. They open fire and terrorize the passengers. Hearing the gunfire, Brad and Tony sprint toward the plane. The gang leader forces a flight attendant to hand over the passenger manifest. Trembling, she gives him the list. One of the gang asks the co-pilot, "Where is your senior pilot?" The co-pilot replies, "He went into the jungle some time ago, but he hasn't returned." Brad and Tony watch silently from a distance. When a woman tries to run, the militants shoot and kill her. Brad wants to rush to help, but Tony restrains him. "Shh, now is not the time to go." The gang loads all the passengers onto a bus, leaves 2 crew members behind, and orders, "Go through the plane and take anything valuable." Then they drive the passengers to their fortified camp. After the gang leaves, Brad angrily tells Tony, "You let them take our passengers, and you wouldn't let me go with you." Tony replies calmly, "They were too many. If you had gone in alone, you couldn't have fought such a large militia." They returned to the plane and were able to catch 2 men who had been stealing valuables from it. Brad asked them, "Where did your leader take the passengers?" They replied, "There's a camp a little way from here. They've all been taken there." Meanwhile, Brad's daughter delivers the paper her father had written to the rescue expert. It contained the plane's location and all necessary details. Using satellite data, the rescue team pins down the aircraft's position. They discover the plane is stranded on an island where a dangerous militant group is present. The rescue officer calls the captain of his private army, explains the situation, and orders him to proceed to the island. The private army captain agrees. He loads a bag full of cash and several weapon-filled packs into a vehicle and prepares to head to the island with his men. Back on the island, Brad sees that before the militants dragged the passengers away, the co-pilot had repaired the plane's power system. The lights and systems are back, which makes Brad very happy. Brad leaves a note inside the plane uniform and, together with Tony, sets off toward the gang's camp. They push through the jungle and reach the militants' stronghold. Stepping out of the car, they sneak into the place where the militants were holding passengers and filming videos to extort ransom from their families. At the same time, the private team sent by the rescue expert arrives at the plane. Finding no one there, the team leader inspects the aircraft and discovers 2 bodies inside. Both of them were the gang members sent to steal valuables from the plane, who Brad had killed. The private team's captain also finds the message Brad had left. It contains the plane's location and other details Brad had left to reach the militants' camp. At the camp, Tony and Brad silently observe and, when the opportunity arises, take out 2 militants from behind. They advance and reach a door. Behind that door, all the passengers are being held captive. Brad wants to free them, but the place is heavily guarded and he doesn't have a key to the door. The 2 of them quietly knock out guard after guard. Tony strikes several with a hammer and incapacitates them. Brad takes a key from one guard and frees all the passengers from the room. Brad tells them, "Quick, get on that bus, the same one they brought you here in." Everyone rushes onto the bus. Tony then informs Brad, "There's only one road out of here by vehicle, but it's heavily guarded. If they see us, they'll open fire immediately." When Brad looks at the passengers, they are all terrified and shaking. Now Brad makes a big decision that puts his own life at risk. He tells Tony, "I'll draw their all the militants' attention away. If you get the chance, take the passengers and get out of here." At first, Tony tries to stop him. "No, if you do that, they'll kill you." But Brad replies firmly, "We have no other way out." Finally, Tony agrees. Brad moves forward alone and confronts the militants, speaking directly to their leader. "I've sent word for help. The rescue team will be here very soon. Let the passengers go." The gang bursts into laughter and begins to beat Brad. The gang leader says, "Let them go that easily. I don't free anyone without money." Just as they are about to kill Brad, the private rescue team suddenly arrives and launches a fierce attack on the militants. After a terrifying exchange of gunfire, they kill many militants, rescue Brad, and put him on the bus to get him out. The gang leader finds that many of his men, including his own younger brother, have been killed. Enraged, he swears, "I will spare no one. I'll kill them all one by one." He tells his men, "Get ready, we finish them now." Inside the bus, the private team's captain tells everyone, "We're a small private unit of just 5. Our mission was to extract you. We are not the government rescue team. The official rescue will still take some time to arrive." Brad grows anxious on hearing this. He says, "We don't have time. They'll chase us again and shoot the moment they spot us. But I have an idea." Back at the plane, Brad tells everyone, "Power is back. The engines can be started. We'll fly out of here now. Get on the plane quickly. We don't have time to wait for the rescue team. If we stay, they'll kill us." All the passengers rush aboard. Brad runs through final checks while the private team takes up positions outside to guard the plane. At that moment, the militants launch an attack. Intense gunfire erupts on both sides. Thanks to the private team's superior weapons, they are able to take down many of the militants. Brad quickly tells the private team leader, "I'll start the plane in 5 minutes. You all get on board then." He then goes to Tony and says, "Thank you for standing by me during my toughest moments." Brad runs through the hail of bullets into the plane and goes to the cockpit, where he begins starting the engines with the co-pilot. Meanwhile, Tony runs out of bullets. When she opens the private team's bag to get new ones, she finds a bag of money. But instead of taking it, she grabs new ammunition from another bag and jumps back into the fight. By this time, Brad turns the plane to the right. The private team soldiers start boarding one by one, while Tony provides cover fire from outside. With the power restored, the radio comes back online. The plane's owner contacts Brad, saying, I'll give you the location of a safe place where you can take everyone. All the passengers board the plane, but Tony does not. She escapes into the jungle with the bag of money, because if she returns to the plane, the PCE would capture her and send her to prison again. The gang leader, seeing his men dead, becomes furious. He brings a rocket launcher to the plane, intending to destroy everyone at once. But Tony sees this just in time. She quickly grabs a gun, shoots the leader, and saves everyone's lives. Brad is deeply impressed by Tony's courage. Then, with full strength and focus, he is able to fly the plane. Tony, having completed her task, feels happy for Brad and the passengers and disappears into the jungle with the bag of money. Brad flies the plane away from the island. The plane's owner provides him with information about a nearby airport. Brad heads toward the location, but suddenly a fire breaks out in the engine, and the plane teeters on the brink of destruction. Brad activates emergency protocols again and carefully begins to land the plane on the runway. After great effort, he successfully lands the plane safely, saving everyone's lives. Brad and the co-pilot are overjoyed. The airline owner and his team are also relieved and happy. Brad looks at the passengers and sees that everyone is safe, which fills him with peace. Everyone applauds and thanks Brad. Shortly afterward, the official rescue team arrives and the passengers rejoice. Brad hands everyone over to the rescue team. Finally, Captain Brad sits peacefully on the plane's stairs and talks to his daughter on the phone. And thus, the story comes to its conclusion.